profound and wondrous Dharma is rarely encountered even in 100 million kalpas. Having it to hear, accept, and maintain, may I taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. All right, so this morning, Myozen. Thank you, Myozen.
Greetings, greetings. The Buddha nature in me greets the Buddha nature in you. So for those who are new to Stone Creek, welcome, welcome. A number of us sit outside weekly, sitting with a tree or a bush or a landscape, considering our connection to the natural world. And during the last few weeks of doing this, we've been considering non-duality. So I want to talk something about that and our experiences with it. When you sit facing a tree, a bush, or a landscape with open hands, open heart, there often comes a relaxation of the habitual feeling of subject encountering object. I meets it. Open heart, open hands means without grasping. No owning, no possessing, no accumulating, no clinging. Grasping requires the duality of grasper and graspee. To have the quality of graspability, the object must be objectified, distanced, made other. True to the nature of duality, othering the tree, bush, landscape objectifies ourselves as well as the other. This othering of the world reinforces our habitual illusion of being separate from everyone and everything else. This socially normal, almost consensual estrangement from the world results in inner feelings of existential loneliness and anxiety, so normal that we take them for granted and hardly recognize them. They just become part of the background condition of our lives that we adapt to as we adapt to a sore knee or unpleasant sound. To be face to face without grasping or clinging is personal. It's intimate, and it offers a way to see into our original nature, which is undivided, to see that we are deeply connected with all beings, mutually arising, abiding, and receding. It's here that we may find our place in the family of things. This face-to-face encounter is like looking into a mirror and seeing our true nature reflected. There are many metaphors to describe the reality behind the illusion of separateness. Suzuki Roshi described it like going over a waterfall. Falling through the air, we temporarily coalesce into separate droplets. And then when we reach bottom, we merge again into the original flowing matrix from which we came. I like the oak tree behind my shop. Roots, trunk, branches, leaves, all share one essence, all composed of the same common elements. Right now, it's covered with leaves. Almost all of them are the dark, mature green of summer. Inspecting them, the many, many leaves on this one tree, no two are alike. Each is unique with its own shading, shape, location, and individual history. Each of them is different from any of the many that covered its branches last summer, or that now, and the ones that are now decomposing into the ground underneath it, or the summer before that, or the summer before that. The ones on the ground have fallen into what I like to call the grand microbial feast, where they are gradually decompose uh, or digested and become nutrition for the other plants and animals and around them, and the microbes, including the oak tree itself. And this has been going on for the whole life of this tree. But in the whole history of oak trees in general, each leaf has its own unique expression, its own voice, never to be repeated. So let's pause and take that in for a minute. Like snowflakes, no two oak trees or oak leaves are alike, and no two oak trees are alike. Our universe seems so intent on diversity that every leaf on this tree is unique and that every other oak tree on the planet is also unique and unlike any other. And we have to imagine that every planet in this whole home galaxy is unique. So when I sit down with this tree, I am an I, and it is an it. I am the subject, and it is the object. And this subject-object distinction is a template for all the other dualities that we experience. Up and down, love, hate, fast, slow, one, many, form, emptiness. All of these apparent opposites are exposed as insubstantial when examined more closely. Their only reality is in constantly changing relation to everything else. And that particular reality only occurs immediately. You can't step into the same stream twice. That's gone, and this is now. The tree is also constantly streaming with change. I'm comforted that at least it continues to stay in the same general location behind my shop so I can come back to it every day. But the tree and I utterly depend on each other for context. No context, no reality. We're kind of like figures in an oil painting. It looks like there is space between us, but that apparent space is itself just continuation of the paint on canvas. We are seamless oil paint connected on a seamless canvas. Figure and ground. But who is the figure and who is the ground? And what meaning does I have here anyway? It could be located anywhere on the painting, on the apparent space between us, as well as the figures that on the ground of the painting, as well as either of the figures. So I have walked by that oak tree, mindlessly taking for granted so often its generous support. After sitting with it deliberately over some years as a practice, we have become much better acquainted. I can now express gratitude and affirm my support and reciprocation. To get to know it better over time in this way makes the relationship more personal, more like an I thou rather than an I it. Dualistic still, but more accurately approaching the reality of our interdependence. I am here now because you are here now. I have to thank you for that. We're in it together. I imagine this solidarity, this mutual interdependent arising to be the basic process of nature. Thich Nhat Hanh calls it interbeing. No context, no reality. And the same is true of those elements that we habitually look to for evidence of our separate reality: form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. They will not be nailed down. They will not be lifted off the canvas. They will elude every attempt to grasp them as something having substance outside the context of their total circumstances. And yet, This idea of the separate and dominant self seems to have become the majority grand illusion of our very young Homo sapien branch of the very young order of primates on this fairly remote and beautiful but unremarkable planet on the thinner outskirts of the Milky Way. Separate, dominant, controlling. Yikes. Have we all taken the red pill? What could possibly go wrong? Well, a lot, actually. This illusion of separation may well have been what got us expelled from the garden. It leads to some pretty crazy and dysfunctional behavior. It's a foundational factor in most of our most intractable problems. And I want to mention some of them. They are in our face. Appropriation of the world. It makes everything property. Colonizers came to California about 500 years ago. They drew grid lines on maps, ignoring land use customs that had been practiced for millennia by the indigenous people who live here, as well as all the non-human inhabitants of the landscape. These property lines are as illusory as the subject-object template they are based on. The southern border blends seamlessly into Mexico. Wind, water, and wildlife ignore it. Efforts to define and harden it with fences, walls, and armed guards has been more or less continuous ever since. It's like the imaginary self fearfully trying to defend itself from the imaginary other. This appropriation results in fence-bound fragmentation of the landscape, destruction of wildlife patterns, and loss of the commons that is our collective evolutionary heritage. It results in the bizarre idea that the owner of the property has the absolute right to kill and destroy everything on or about it. Last week, Dojin talked about feeling free as a child to run through neighbors' yards. I can remember that feeling too, and I want that feeling for all children everywhere. Objectification and ownership of the natural world allows us to see a forest in terms of board feet of lumber at X dollars per foot, and then enforce that vision with chainsaws, logging trucks, and armed police. It allows us to turn rich and diverse landscapes, home to many forms of life, into soy, corn, or wine grape monocrops, harmful to so many and benefiting so few. Objectification and appropriation of water allows us to dim, channel, and divert the free flow of water in the landscape in a kind of hardening of the planetary arteries. It's reflective of a deeply ingrained and religiously sanctioned attitude of human supremacy over all the other forms of life. Dominant monotheistic religions teach that only God and certain chosen ones of us humans have the quality of soul or spirit. All the other beings are seen as inanimate or as biomechanisms available to appropriate for our own purposes. Objectification of the other is the foundation of white supremacy culture. It rationalizes the myth of meritocracy, that the rich and privileged deserve their status as a result of their natural inborn superiority. It helps soldiers overcome their reluctance to kill each other. It allows voters to elect politicians who will ignore the wishes of the people and cheerfully vote for war and oppression. Extended to other human beings, this objectification of the other allowed the institution of colonialism and slavery to thrive in America. That calamitous history of cruelty has left an enormous raw wound of generational trauma. The unaddressed enslavement of Africans and the attempted genocide of indigenous people undermines everything good that we try to do. The objectification and subjugation of women has deprived the society of the wisdom of the womb, allowing us to disregard our responsibility to future generations, to act heedlessly as if we didn't have a mother. We overcome units, no, we ourselves become units of labor, units of consumption, units of attention for marketers. The whole world becomes commodified. Everything is for sale. Objectification has allowed us to ignore the natural principle of reciprocation and thus amassed a huge debt of suffering for our descendants. Enormous damage has been done. Enormous suffering is the result. There's no way to walk it back. We can only go on from what is real now, here, today. We are in this stream together. As a Sangha, we are trying to look at our place in the continuation of white supremacy culture and where we may effectively act to end it. It seems clear that we cannot do this with discriminating thought alone, but must approach it with open hands and listening hearts as we do the oak tree. One of our founders, Dogen Zenji, 800 some years ago, dramatically opened the understanding and teachings of the Buddha way to include grasses, trees, pebbles, fences, and gates, and maintained that all things continually express the Dharma of life as it is. How do they do this? How can we listen and understand? If we rely on our ears and on discriminating thought, our habitual first response, then we fall into that subject-object objectification trap that guarantees failure. If we can relax our dominating and inquisitive mind, open the hand of thought, and meet the trees without expectation, then we may recognize a mutuality of Dharma speaking, each to each, that has never stopped. Remember that we are intermingling relatives from forever, made of the same stuff, following the same customs and processes. I try to incorporate that long view into my talks. I like to go from the macro to the micro. I found the changing of perspective helpful. It's like going to the seashore or being alone in the desert. Taking a large view is helpful in reducing our habitual tendency to make everything be about us, when in reality, we are like floating clouds passing by, empty bubbles rising and bursting, like lightning flashes in the sky, while the truth of our interdependent unity never fades away. Imagination is one of our strongest allies in the bodhisattva work of engaging with the suffering of the world. Poetry and metaphor clothe our minds as drizzles and dew clothe our bodies. In the long view, mountains move dramatically. They are always walking, dancing, arising, and subsiding. Imagine a time-lapse movie of Mount Tamalpais, for instance, with a frame taken every 100 years for millennia. Gary Snyder wrote a little poem about this. He says, as the cricket's soft hum is to us, so are we to the trees, as are they to the rocks and the hills. Shall I say that again? As the cricket's soft hum is to us, so are we to the trees, as are they to the rocks and the hills. Shifting perspective from the macro of galaxies to the micro of crickets or of subatomic particles invites us to our mental limits. As the imagination reaches for infinity, the mind boggles. It's clearly ungraspable. A boggled mind is a looser, more spacious, more flexible mind. Say yes to this. Let yourself be astounded at the beauty and intricacy of a mushroom or a spider or a stone. Stay with it long enough to recognize that you and it come from the same stuff by the same processes. Stop for a moment taking the world for granted and let miracles abound. No two oak leaves are alike. Each one is a unique miracle, and we are surrounded with them. How fortunate we are to have been born at a time when there is widespread access to this teaching of non-duality. Despite the very powerful social orthodoxy of separateness and objectification, we still find ways to experience the unity behind it. This is at the very heart of what may be called the religious experience. Mystics of many traditions have described it. It's prominent in the teaching of our Zen lineage, as well as the Dzogchen school of Tibetan Buddhism, in Sufism, in Advaita Vedanta, and in Taoism. Psychedelics have helped many. Music and poetry approach it. There are also secular and scientific communities of inquiry into it. Modern physics is gradually unfolding a new non-dualistic paradigm in which time and space, matter and energy are waves in one oceanic reality. That, of course, includes us and everything about us. Like the oak leaf, we are both one and unique, both alone and in total relationship to the entire universe. Each of these traditions has its own vocabulary and metaphorical framework to describe it. Our teaching often says something like, in darkest night, it is perfectly clear. In the light of dawn, it is hidden. Or, it is not to be found by seeking, although seeking seems to be part of the experience of those who seem to have found it. What brought you to this Stone Creek Zoom screen this morning? Wasn't it your own way-seeking mind? Other responses from our tradition say it is closer than breath, or that we already have it, that we are never apart from it, that we can neither seize nor reject it. What a relief. I think all of us here have likely had some taste of it. I keep referring to it as it for the sake of discourse, although calling it is already to miss the mark. How do we keep touch with that kind of awareness in a way that can balance and inform our habitual feelings of separateness and distinction where so much suffering takes place? What does this mean for my life? For my practice? How can we remind ourselves in our loneliness that underneath this illusion of separation is the bright pearl of unity? How can we be a refuge and comfort for the people we love, facing together with them the suffering of these fraught circumstances? For me, it means I'm called to occupy this physical, mental moment as well as I can with the support of all beings. Zazen helps me do that, making time to sit still to face my whole life. The three treasures of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are truly treasures. Conscious breathing helps me. To step out onto the planet, connecting with its landscapes, plants, and animals is a great support. To remember that I'm always surrounded by ordinary miracles and to slow down enough to spend some quality time with them. The love of family and friends. This moment is not a rehearsal. It's the real deal. I'm stuck with it. There is no off-ramp from the universe. There is no place called away that I can throw the unwelcome results of my actions. There is only here. The preferences and aversions that continually reinforce my illusion of separateness don't belong to anyone but myself. They will eventually and surely subside, maybe suddenly, maybe slowly, who knows how or when. Meanwhile, I have to take full responsibility for them, including the suffering they generate for myself and others. Meanwhile, I take great comfort in knowing that this brief lightning flash of human life, as Barton, Bird Brother, Myozen, is still an expression of radiant reality, exactly as land, trees, walls, fences, and pebbles are, and that I belong here in exactly the same way as they do. Incredible! What a wonderful free gift of this generous universe. No one turned away for lack of funds. What a wonderful free gift to realize that at this very moment, the land, trees, grasses, and all beings are involved in deep mutual assistance in awaking intimately to their original nature, and that all of us are both beneficiaries and partners in that mutual assistance. Here we may sit with all dualities of body and mind. We sit with form and formlessness, the relative and the absolute, the personal and the universal, while all around us, all beings are singing the Dharma. Can you hear that? Can you make out the lyrics? In my imagination, it sounds something like, come home, come home. You are not an orphan. Your mother loves you. All is forgiven. This place is for you, here, now, exactly as you are. This is it. There is no other. Come home. So welcome home, and how are you with that? Comments or suggestions?
Thank you, Myozen, for that lovely talk. It's just what I needed this morning.
You're so welcome. I love it.
Hi, Barton. Thank you. That was a beautiful talk and really circled in for me on how the amazing myriad diversity of our life circumstance, where we are, is something always to reflect upon and find how we are intrinsically a part of this fabric, as it were. I keep having difficulty with my conditioning in my usual already listening kind of knee-jerk reaction to certain things that are problematic. But it's a great reminder your Dharma talk presents that we are just really all very much connected, and we have value, and we're gems all together here. We're just gems all together, and to see what is great about the other, even in our differences. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta.
Thank you, Barton. This is Teresa.
Yes, it is.
I have such fond memories of sitting with you and the others on the land. Thank you for your talk and many blessings.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you for the talk. I really enjoyed the reminder that every leaf is different. And so I'm enjoying each of us as a human leaf in our own differences as well. Thank you.
Every week unique, never to be repeated.
Martin, I also wanted to say, well, first of all, I love hearing from you. And I think it's interesting too to take into account the dimension of time and how you're just these teensy sparks in the massive length of time that, you know, has passed and the future that we're all in when you talk about us all being together. Anyway, I like the idea of time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the miracles. Yes, yes.
Thank you, Brother Barton. I love you so much. I love the oak tree. I feel connected to you both in this moment. And my question for you is, when you drift away from your connection to the oak, how do you call yourself back? How do I call myself back?
Well, thank you, Brother Barry. That's totally mutual love there. And I don't know. It's you know, I fall asleep and then I wake up again, and then I dream that I'm dreaming, and then I dream that I wake up, and I just go on from one unique week to the next. Thank you. Is that enough words for today, for this morning?
Thanks, your words are precious.
All right. Thank you very much, Myozen. I will put the Bodhisattva vows in the chat. Four great Bodhisattva vows. Means are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are infinite. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is boundless. I vow to realize it.